Albert Einstein was a brilliant scientist who knew a thing or two about art as well. When he referred to this particular work of art as one of the most profound paintings he ever saw, it's worth checking out why he made such a bold statement. The painting is titled The Burial of the Count of Orgaz, and it was painted by Dominikos Theotokopoulos, also known by his nickname El Greco. I will refer to the Greek-born painter by his nickname throughout this video. Just to make it a bit easier. He earned this nickname in Toledo, Spain, where he spent the final decades of his life. The story of how he ended up there is just as fascinating as this mesmerizing painting. In this video, you'll learn exactly why I believe El Greco was one of the most influential artists in history, and whether or not Albert Einstein exaggerated his statement about his most notable painting. Just a quick note, this painting not only features the man who commissioned it, but also the influential painter himself. But more about this later on. The burial of the Count of Orgaz was completed in 1588 in Toledo, Spain, at the height of El Greco's career. El Greco was born in 1541 in the kingdom of Candia. That's how the modern-day Greek island of Crete was known at the time. What's fascinating is that the island was an overseas colony of the Republic of Venice at the time. Until the early 13th century, it was part of the Byzantine Empire. This is important because the art produced on the island can be classified as post-Byzantine, which means it featured both Western and Eastern influences. This fascinating intermingling of styles was the base of El Greco's work, and it partially explains why he was so ahead of his time during the 16th century. Saying that El Greco was ahead of his time is definitely an understatement. Several modern artists from the 20th century, including Pablo Picasso, the German expressionists, and even Jackson Pollock, were influenced by his work. He quickly became a master on the island of Crete, and he followed his dream to pursue a career as an artist in Venice. Not much is known about his time here, but between 1567 and 1570 he may have worked in the studio of Titian. Titian was one of the three great Venetian painters of the 16th century and was already in his 80s at the time. El Greco moved to Rome in 1570, and there he worked for the influential Farnese family. Just about every painter in Rome was still influenced by the masters of the High Renaissance, such as Raphael and Michelangelo. Now here's a fascinating anecdote that highlights the intriguing character that El Greco possessed. While every other artist in Rome stood in awe of Michelangelo's work at the Sistine Chapel, El Greco was one of the few who criticized these frescoes, especially his Last Judgment. He once mentioned that he thought Michelangelo was a good man, but he did know how to paint. He probably joked about the first part. Very few people were bold enough to criticize a man like Michelangelo at the time, but it proved that El Greco was highly confident about his own abilities. Not everybody appreciated his statements, and he soon acquired enemies, including members of the Farnese family. When El Greco heard that King Philip II of Spain was looking for court painters, he moved to Spain in 1577. That was probably a good idea. Now here's a remarkable notion about El Greco's move to Spain. His ultimate goal was to become the new court painter of Philip II. Although he completed 2 commissions, the King of Spain was not a fan, and he quickly dismissed the Greek-born painter. Because El Greco had made friends along the way in Toledo, he managed to secure several commissions in the Spanish city just south of Madrid. Some of the most stunning altarpieces he completed during this period were the Disrobing of Christ and the Holy Trinity. These already have all the elements that define his mature style, such as the expressionist elements, distorted figures, and bold use of colors. The Mannerist painter earned the commission for the work described in this video, The Burial of the Count of Orgaz, in 1586, and he delivered it less than 2 years later in early 1588. It's probably the most stunning painting he ever completed, and what's fascinating is that it still hangs in its original location today, the Church of Santo Tomé in central Toledo. This is important because it relates to the story that the painting depicts. The 14th century mayor of the small town of Orgaz just south of Toledo was a great philanthropist who helped many people during his lifetime. His name was Don Gonzalo Ruiz de Toledo, and when he died, he left behind a sum of money to rebuild the church of San Tomé. El Greco received the commission to decorate the chapel where the Spanish aristocrat was buried, which is also exactly what you can see in this painting. According to a local legend, Saint Stephen and Saint Augustine descended from the heavens above to personally bury the philanthropist. Apart from the distinctive style of El Greco, the painting was highly popular at the time as it depicts numerous famous contemporary people. These 17th century celebrities were transported into this 14th century legend, which must have come across as a shock to them. The painting also features the priest who commissioned the work, a man named Andres Núñez. He's the reading man on the far right. El Greco also painted himself staring directly at the viewer, full of self-confidence. The same is true for the young boy in the bottom left corner, who was the painter's son, Jorge Manuel. We know this because there's a handkerchief inside the boy's pocket which not only features the artist's signature, but also the boy's birth year, 1578. As you can see, the upper section of the painting, which symbolizes heaven, magnificently intertwines with the lower half, a scene that takes place on earth. The reason why this painting contains two sections is because it depicts the moment that the righteous man is welcomed to paradise, also known as the Assumption of the Soul. The upper section features a large number of people as well. They all look at the triangle formed by Jesus, his mother Mary, and Saint John the Baptist. Among the figures to the right of this heavenly spectacle are apostles, biblical figures such as Moses, David, and Noah, as well as King Philip II of Spain. What's striking is that the King of Spain was still alive when El Greco painted him in the heavenly section. Perhaps he still hoped to become his court painter? Who knows? The entire scene is divided by an angel who pushes the soul of the Count of Orgaz upwards. Therefore, it becomes clear that the painting symbolizes that good deeds lead to salvation. Looking at the expression on this man's face, I think he surely got the message. To conclude, I think that by now you understand why Albert Einstein called this one of the most profound paintings he ever saw. He mentioned this statement in his travel diaries to the Far East, Palestine and Spain, which he wrote in the early 1920s. Less than 2 decades later, the painting was featured on the peseta banknote, emphasizing the cultural significance that this painting holds in Spain. Contemporary viewers stated that the people of Toledo never got tired of this painting, and the sentiment hasn't changed until today, well over 4 centuries later. For El Greco, it's this painting that solidified his reputation in Toledo, and it was likely the reason why he never left the city. He stayed in Toledo until he passed away in 1614, leaving behind a legacy of dozens of mesmerizing paintings. The burial of the Count of Orgaz was definitely one of the painter's ultimate masterpieces, and it highlights why I believe El Greco was one of the most influential painters in art history.